Vietnam, Operation Rolling Thunder, a joint effort between the USAF, the U.S. Navy, and the South Vietnamese Air Force, designed to cripple North Vietnam's ability and willingness to wage war in the South. Lieutenant General Spence Armstrong took part in this key operation, piloting and leading F-105s into battle as a flight commander, and later as an operations officer. A veteran of 100 missions, he and his men faced fierce opposition as they tried to survive a gauntlet of SAM missiles, flak fire, and sneak MiG attacks, all while restrained by Washington's rules of engagement.
The work that we did in Rolling Thunder was to stop the infiltration of materials and ammo and people down the Ho Chi Minh Trail to the Viet Cong, or to later to regular North Vietnamese soldiers. So were we trying to knock out North Vietnam and to get them to come to the peace table? Obviously, yes. But our objective, as I saw it, and as I believe is true, was that we were trying to win the war in South Vietnam against the Viet Cong. And one way to do this was to deny the Viet Cong the kinds of support they were getting from the North. If you were a pilot assigned to an aircraft or a crew member of any kind, and you're flying out of South Vietnam, and your targets were all in South Vietnam, or your mission was all in South Vietnam, it was a year-long tour, 1 year. If you were in Thailand, we didn't bomb in South Vietnam. We only bombed in North Vietnam, and we bombed in Laos, although we didn't talk about it. But the tour length was 100 missions over North Vietnam, which you could get in about 6.5 months. So it was a shorter period of time. The differences in the defenses were two orders of magnitude. I mean, there's no comparison to the defenses you would have in South Vietnam with light armor than it was up in the Hanoi area, where you had surface air missiles, 85 millimeter flak, and you got harassed by MiGs firing heat-seeking rockets. I was a brand new major, and we had mostly majors in the squadron, and some of those, a couple of lieutenant colonels, only had a few captains, no lieutenants. And so you moved up to be an element leader or a flight commander, which means 4 airplanes, or the mission commander, which means all 32 airplanes. Including 8 F-4s for MiG-Cap. And you did that based upon how well you were doing. And nobody objected to it. I mean, the people that outranked you, they knew that if they're going to make it back, they'd rather have the person in charge with the most experience. There were 2 primary airplanes from the Air Force that were used over North Vietnam, the F-105 and the 4. We had RF-101s who took pictures, we had B-66s who were occasionally there, but the ones who really carried the air war to North Vietnam were the 105 and the F-4. When the airplane was built, it was designed to be a tactical nuclear weapon delivery. And so it was designed for long range. They carried a nuclear bomb in the bomb bay, and 2 450-gallon tanks on the wings. So it had pretty good range, even without in-flight refueling. So they stationed them at Bitburg, Germany, and at Spangdahlem, Germany. They stationed them at Kadena and in Yokota. And so when the activity popped up in Southeast Asia, then this airplane, because it could carry so many, could carry as much as a B-17 in World War II. And so it transitioned into being a tactical fighter from being a nuclear weapon deliverer fairly easily. Single engine airplane, had a Gatling gun here that would carry 1,000 rounds of 20 millimeter and fired hydraulically, and it didn't go like you would on a 20 millimeter in an F-100. It went, and the sound was the hydraulic motor going. And you could fire 1,000 rounds in about 5 or 6 seconds. Nothing could go as fast as a 105 on the deck. Because of the stubby wings, it wasn't very good once you got up at altitude, and not very good at all in maneuvering. But as far as moving out, nothing could catch it. We flew with two kinds of configuration. The one you see here in this airplane that I built not very well shows a multiple ejection rack on the center line with 6 750-pound bombs. And here are 450-gallon drop tanks. We did have another configuration that we flew. We went after bridges where we put a 3,000-pound bomb on each wing and put a 650-gallon tank center line. That was the slickest because there was less drag on that. A 3,000-pound bomb is a big bomb. Right now, the biggest one they make to carry on fighters is a 2,000-pound. And nobody else carried 3,000 pounds but us. We called them instant swimming pools because it was a big hole you could make with those things. And if you're going after a bridge, you want to knock out the abutments and the supports, it was the thing to do. But you had to hit it first. The F-105 carried most of the bomb loads into North Vietnam prior to the time the B-52s came. The F-4s would occasionally carry bombs, but not that much. Even the F-4s were restricted like we were to dive bombing because you had to be able to see the target. When we talk about the term rules of engagement, rules of engagement most of the time talk about you got to be able to identify the enemy before you can do it and things like that. That's probably not the best way to express the limitations that we operate under. For instance, we could not go within 30 miles of the Chinese border. All the targets had been, early on, all the targets in North Vietnam had been identified with a JCS, Joint Chiefs of Staff number. And so whenever we were fragged in on a target, it would be because somebody back in Washington had picked it. And what I found out later was there was a weekly meeting with LBJ and McNamara and maybe the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and a couple of the McBundy brothers or whatever. And they would pick out the targets and that would flow down to us. So we weren't allowed to hit targets that had not been approved. Once it had been hit, then you could hit it again. So some of the targets were very late being hit, like Phu Quyen, their MiG-21 base. We didn't hit that until November of '67. In fact, I was on the first raid. In order to bomb a target, you had to be able to see it. And so we would set our Doppler navigation at the target, and we would try to offset by 3 miles. And the reason is that we'd come in about 15,000 feet. And so if you roll into the target like such and pull down, by the time you get on your dive, you're at about 45 degrees because 15,000 feet this way and 15,000 feet that way. And we would set the little flickers. It had tapes, and 105 had tapes, a tape for airspeed and a tape for altitude. And we would set the marker on the airspeed at 500 knots and set the marker on the tape at 8,000 feet. And so you're in the dive and you've got the target in your sight and you see those things flick down, which they came down very quickly. When you did, that's when you released. On the way in, we had to worry about MiGs. We didn't worry too much about MiG-17s in my time because they've been replaced pretty much with a MiG-21. And the MiG-21s would come up and around and behind us and pop up behind the F-105s. They didn't ever shoot at the F-4s because F-4s weren't carrying any bombs. And the F-4s were higher and behind us. And they'd come in the first time we didn't know that they were there generally, just when somebody got hit by a heat seeker. And so that happened quite often. And then the MiG pilots, if they were smart, they just accelerated out and went to China, and the F-4s couldn't catch them. If they decided to hang around and see what happened, the F-4s would eventually get them. But if they were smart, they could take a shot and head to China and have a cup of tea and come back in the afternoon and try it again. We didn't know they were in the area because the best radar we didn't have AWACS at the time. We had an EC-121, which was poor radar, and they would have to go very low out over the Gulf, and they could see somewhat. But the radar, we had a radar in the 105, but it was not an air-to-air radar, it was air-to-ground radar, which we didn't use because We didn't need to, never did. The Air Force had radar, but it was forward-looking radar. So there was no defense against the MiG-21s coming up behind and shooting and going. Once they did this and they were discovered, then of course the radar could pick them up. But no, we had no radar warning. We did have some intelligence warnings sometimes that because they would hear some of the vectoring by the ground controllers. So sometimes we'd get, or sometimes we could see the glint off the canopy because they'd be coming down, 10,000 feet higher than we were, and if they moved at all, we could see a glint off the canopy, and that was the first time we could see them. And we knew they were coming down behind and then back up. Now, if we knew they were there, sometimes we would jettison our bombs. And one time, there were more than 2 of them back there. They were right on the tail, and it was too late to do anything, so just punch off everything and let them fly in their face. And they would break off, all the stuff come flying down in their face, and they'd break off. Of course, they successfully defeated your strike. And so there's always a question of mind is, should we just hang on to our bombs and risk getting shot at, or should we do this? And we sort of said, I don't know how valuable this target is, but I'm more valuable than that. And so we would tend to do that if we had to jettison the bombs and the tanks. It was a successful tactic if they had not already fired. If they had already fired and hit somebody and took off, well, then it wasn't the point of doing it. You've been able, because they're gone. They would fire 2 apiece. One time they came up behind, and we were going in a land route. And they came up behind, and I'm number 2 in the second flight, so I'm on the inside of the formation. And we see Bass Lead get hit by a heat seeker, and he got out and was a POW. The guy on the right saw that, and he said, "Break right." So we broke right, and they'd say that the second missile fire went right above my position that I'd previously occupied. So if you broke soon enough, you could avoid them, but most of the time you didn't see them. The first time we knew there was something back there where somebody got hit. And they were almost always lethal. We had one guy that came back with one stuck in the rear end of his fuselage because it didn't go off. It didn't explode, but he came back with the carcass of the missile sticking out of the back of his airplane. When we were given the targets, something called a frag order, fragmentary order. It would come up from 7th Air Force, and the mission commander would go over and plan it for the next morning flight. They'd tell us what ordnance to take. They'd give us a target, the aiming points on a target. Maybe it's an airfield, they wanted the aiming point to be at a certain part on the airfield. And they would tell us where we were going: water, which is up the Gulf of Tonkin, or up over land, which meant that we went up over northern Thailand into Laos and dropped off there, and then swung down into the Hanoi area from the northwest, down along a series of mountain ranges that was known as Thud Ridge. And you were subjected to MiGs, mostly land route, not so much the Gulf route, but you were always subjected to SA-2s, getting close to the target, and subjected to 85 millimeter flak. The 888 85 millimeter, you could see them from the air, and they looked like a wagon wheel because they had sandbags around each gun, and they had a director in the middle. And so when they would fire, the guy director would point, all the guns would point, and then they would ring off. And we could actually see the muzzle flashes that would say, "They're ringing off down there." And then pretty soon you'd see the flak come up, just like in World War II, where it'd be a sparkle, and then black. And one day I'm flying in there towards the target, and I see them ringing off, and didn't think anything about it. Next thing I know, poop, 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 poop. I'm sitting right in the middle of the whole pattern. I mean, there's got to be somebody looking out for me to do that. Now, the other things they had was the 37 millimeter and the 57 millimeter, which were pretty good sized weapons. Down real low, you worried more about small arms fire than you did the 37 to 57. But what happened is when you rolled in on the target, the 85s had probably already finished because they were shooting at you on the way in. When you roll in on the target, now you're going to hit head to head with the 37 and the 57. And I remember the first time that I saw it because the bullets are red hot because of, picked up the the air resistance, and they're red hot. And you see them whistling by the cockpit. It reminded me of in Tennessee driving along on a country road at night with the lights on, and you see these bugs just dodging the things. So that's what I remember about that. And when these things were going by, you wanted to get as tight as you could because you wanted your profile. And seldom were we hit directly on going down the chute. The 85 millimeters on the way in were more of a threat. And sometimes if they started firing and we'd see them right almost at a level, we'd all go up 1,000 feet on the way in. If it was clear, you could see where they had the SAM emplacements because it was sort of a leaf, a clover leaf. But they weren't always manned. They moved them around. And sometimes you'd see what looked like where our sight was there, or they may even have dummies there, but there'd be no missiles in it, so you had to watch. But if they fired me, if one was fired, you could see the dust coming up from the ground, and you could follow it. And once it got up to a certain altitude, the booster would fall off, and all it would have was a little sustainer motor in the back of it, which they used for moving the flaps and the elevons to control it. Well, we used to say that if you can see that sustaining motor, the fire from it, and it's got a profile, you're okay. If it looks like a burning bowling ball, it's headed for you. And so if you did, and it was looking for you to come down, what you would do, somebody would yell, take it down. You push it down, and then look, and the SAM could not maneuver with you. And so if you saw it, you had a very good chance of evading it. We went on one target one time where there was a 3-ship, and I was on the inside, and so the SAMs were all coming from over there. My job is to look that way. And so they kept calling SAM brakes, take it down. And the very last one, I took it down, and I see the SAM going right in front of me. Close enough I could see the fins wiggle on it. It had a proximity fuse. We thought it was about 60-foot effectiveness. I don't know what it was, but I'm sure it was within a couple hundred feet, no more than that. But it went straight on up. And it would self-destruct at about 35,000 feet in a nice big orange burst. Now, if it was this undercast underneath you, and you couldn't see them coming up, then that was pretty scary because you had to be able to see it. They got the two-seated F-105 and turned it into a Wild Weasel. And what they did, you had an electronic warfare officer in the rear seat, and he had a scope better than the other airplanes have. And they would come in low and they would pick up SAM sites, and they would either fire a radiation missile or sometimes roll in on them and dive bomb. It depended upon how aggressive the leader of the Weasels were. Some of them would stay out and lob in things, and others would go right in there and take on the SAM sites individually. It turns out that we had two majors that came to Korat, and they happened to be very aggressive. And so they were very effective in going after the SAM sites. The Weasel tactic was slightly ahead of us, slightly lower, so that they could pick up any SAM site that was radiating and take it on. So before we got there, and they were generally pretty effective about that. By the way, I never took a hit, which was very, very unusual. And I may have been the only one in the squadron that didn't take a hit of some sort. I kept a log of the airplanes that we lost in the 7 months I was there, and we lost 37 airplanes. A few of those, three of them were accidents, but the rest of them were shot down. And most of the pilots were not recovered because they were shot down north of the Red River. And rescue there is almost impossible, and you wouldn't want to subject helicopters and A-1s to try to pick up people where it was flat and a lot of people on the ground. So that's the reason most of the people shot down were not picked up and became POWs. The wing commander was shot down in November. Turns out in October, the vice commander was shot down over Hanoi. And I'd gone down to fly, and the name Armstrong was canceled out, and Flynn was put in. And so he got hit by SAM over Hanoi on that day, on that mission. Then we had the DO, the third ranking colonel, and he gets shot down by MiG. And so we got a new wing commander, and he died of a heart attack. So within the first 4 months, all of our senior leadership was gone. So it turns out that us majors sort of decided what we were going to do. And so we knew that the SAMs were very much aware of when the Weasel fired an anti-radiation missile, that it left a nice gray streak. And we were sure they had outside observers that when they saw that gray streak, they would say, turn it off. It didn't look like a Sidewinder. It looked like, they could tell what it was, very distinctive. So a bunch of us got together and they said, when we go up there today, we're going to an airfield just in the southern part of Hanoi. We're going to go up and we're going to turn right and go almost due east. We're going land route and then head up the side of the river. And when we get close, what we're going to do is we're going to load some Sidewinders on the first and third airplane. And when we get close, we're going to fire those Sidewinders. And they'll teach them. But we go up, and as we made the turn due east, we got hit by two MiG-21 who came down from Vietnam. Well, our tactic was when you got hit by MiG-21s, you go into afterburner and race them to the SAM ring, and they'll leave you alone because they didn't want to go to the SAM ring either. So that was our tactic. One time it didn't work. But in this case, when we broke right and went into afterburner, I lowered the nose, and I noticed that the thing flicked. It went supersonic, but it didn't bother me. So we turned and went back up and rolled in on the target, and I was carrying CBUs, cluster bomb unit, and my target was the 85 millimeter sight on the northeast end of the runway. So I rolled in, and no SAMs fired, no AAA, perfect bombing run. I got there, I said, this is really a good hit. We get back on the ground, and we always had a mass debriefing. Everybody gets together, and what did everybody see? And this is after we had a maintenance debriefing, and after we had the individual intelligence debriefing. And so I said, anybody see the CBUs hit? Well, the two flights behind us, which normally could see them hit and sparkle, they didn't see them. We wondered about it. Later that night, those of us in the flight were called down to ops because there'd been a report from the White House. Well, a question because 3 people had been killed in Hanoi. One at the International Control Commission and one at another embassy. And they didn't know what happened. Well, it turns out, because one of our airplanes had the camera, the Ka-70, that swept 100, that when you hit the button, it started, and it showed that the CBUs came off, and instead of falling straight down, they went into a spiral and sort of spun out to the side. And the CBU came in a pod, about the size of a 750-pound bomb. In the nose of it, there was a propeller. And out of the propeller up into the bomb rack was a wire. And so when you released it, the wire came out and the propeller started turning and it opened it up like a clamshell. Well, that didn't happen because the fins had been pulled off. And so then the hit was sort of a dud. And so we didn't know what had happened, but we suspected that's what it was because one guy had pictures to show that. It turns out I went back and read the book, and it says, don't fly above 0.95 with these CBUs. Well, we'd have done it anyway. I mean, with MiG-21s closing in on you, you're going to read the manual? I don't think so. And so they said, don't do that again. I hate to say this, but the Navy with their A-6s were getting missions into North Vietnam, Hanoi area, even when they had low clouds. And we couldn't do it because we were bombing visually. So with low clouds, we couldn't do it. So the Air Force wanted to be able to get some counters in that, and so one of the solutions was to use radar bombing. And over in Laos, there was a TACAN station there, Channel 97, and so they put some radar, old SAC bombing radar up there to guide the airplanes in. And that site was manned by former Air Force people who had been discharged from the Air Force and hired by Lockheed because we weren't supposed to be in Laos. So they were there and they would guide us in. We did it 3 times. The first time we had a flight of 16 airplanes. And the first flight of 4 was spread out like this, another flight of 4, another flight of 4 like this. And I was in the last flight. And so when the guy would give you the directions to fly, we're flying over with overcast, give you directions to fly in, turn you, whatever, give you a countdown to drop, and the lead flight would hit the bomb button, instantly release. The rest of us had set our releases on a timer. So we hit it and held it, and then they released. With that particular one, we fly in, and when my bombs came off, I saw them, and the airfield we were hitting is just outside the clouds. We could have rolled in. And then the second time we did this, I was flying with the Weasels, carrying bombs, and we never found the target. So that was a loss. The third time we tried it, we were going in on Phu Quyen. And so we were coming up the land route, and on the way up there, MiG-21s shot down 2 of the Weasels. And the other Weasels had to break off to protect them. So we went into the area without any SAM protection. But it was undercast anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. So we go in there, we turn down, and we had, once again, 3 flights of forward and trail. I was leading the flight that carried the cluster bomb units, and we were sitting out just on the outside of the stream. And these SAMs started coming up through the clouds. Hit two airplanes, including the wing commander. I watched him go spiraling down into the clouds on fire. And then the radar director over on this mountain over there, he said, I've lost contact with you. You'll have to turn around and go back, and I'll bring you in again. Well, you can imagine what we said was not G-rated. In the meantime, we got a report that there was a MiG coming in at a 4 o'clock position, so I called my flights and said, punch him off and we're going to break right. So we did, and broke out of there, and never did see the MiG. But we got back, and that was the last time we did it. Last time we used the radar. It turns out that this was in, I think, November of '67. And in March of '68, the North Vietnamese stormed that mountain and killed most of the technicians that were there. Some of them were evacuated, but one of the Air Force sergeants that was there was killed, and he was later awarded the Medal of Honor just recently by President Obama. But it was one of those things where we were determined to get counters to show that we were doing our part. And just like in South Vietnam, they were worried about body count, we were worried about counters. Not us, but the powers that be. And so they finally knocked that off, but it wasn't very accurate anyway. After they had the partial bombing halt in April of '68, well, then of course, that took all the pressure off of North Vietnam, because they had, from the 19th parallel up to as far north as you could go, we weren't striking them there, and so they were free to move materials and things around, and then they actually bring some stuff back down into the lower Rolling Thunder packages. So we really lost our momentum there. When I finished my 100 missions, I had to stay another 2 weeks. They didn't fly anymore, but I had to stay another 2 weeks. And what I did was to write up the procedures for being a force commander, and what you did, samples of the things and so forth. So I did that, and we put it in the safe. Now that was never used again, because we never went in 32 ship flights after the partial bombing. Probably 4 ship, maybe 8. So we never did that. And when we finally got back into it with the B-52s, of course, didn't use that. They were using the old SAC method, whatever that happened to be. So the 3 weeks I spent there writing all this up so the next guy could figure out, wouldn't have to start from scratch, was a nice exercise, but it didn't pay off. If you look back at the history of the Vietnamese War, the air power part in South Vietnam was probably adequate, because we had a number of airplanes down there. The problem down there was getting along with the people and to get the South Vietnamese Army to do their part. When we dealt with the North Vietnamese, it was a very different situation. We were trying to stop the flow of materials and people. And so we were fairly effective in doing that. We would have been much more effective if we had struck stronger and harder in the beginning. But we use the term of gradual response. Now, fortunately, when we went into Iraq back in Desert Storm, we went in full bore and didn't hold back. So I think there was a lesson learned there. The lesson learned is that if you're relying on, we'll do that, and if they do this, we'll do this, and so forth, you don't really achieve the impact that you want to if you hit them hard one time. That's a lesson learned.
At what point in your Air Force career did you get introduced to the F-105?
I was in graduate school at Southern California in 1965-66. And while I was there, I was thinking I'm going to miss out on this war because I had a lot of friends that already had assignments. But I received an assignment at the time before I finished out there for the 105. And the sequence of events was I'd go to survival school at the completion and then to Nellis Air Force Base and check out in the 105 to go to Tak Lee, Thailand.
So when you were at Nellis, how often did you get into Las Vegas?
Surprisingly, I didn't go down there as much as you'd think during that time. We were pretty busy. I went out a few times to make sure I wasn't going to win any extra money.
Tell me as much as you can remember about your journey to Vietnam. How did they get you over there? Did you fly an airplane over there, or did they ship you some other way? Just tell us about going to Vietnam and your first impressions of being there.
Okay. I left from Fort Walton Beach, Eglin Air Force Base in the end of March 1967. I flew commercially to San Francisco and then up to Travis Air Force Base, where I was on a military contract flight that island hopped to the Philippines, Clark Air Base, and I went through jungle survival school there for about 10 days. And then I flew again on a contract flight to Bangkok, and then on a military airplane, C-47, the old Goonie Bird, up to Tak Lee.
And what do you remember about stepping off an airplane for the first time?
I had a very memorable introduction. The fellow who was the ops officer for my squadron and the one that became my flight commander subsequently said, "Welcome to the 354th, the highest loss rate squadron in Southeast Asia." Yeah, what a good deal. And about a week later, I went up and met with the wing commander who welcomed the new people. And he told us that in 2 years of operation, the track record was in the 100 missions or 1 year tour, you had a 50-50 chance of being shot down. If you were shot down, you had a 50-50 chance of being rescued. Welcome to the war.
Most pilots are in love with the airplane that they flew, but some of those loss rates had to do with the airplane you were flying, correct?
The loss rate, I think, was primarily the mission. But backing up, when I was in graduate school and we knew people were getting assignments, I had volunteered or indicated an interest in every airplane in Southeast Asia except the F-105. And that was based on a briefing from Colonel Yeager when he was head of the test pilot school. He described it as an electronic monster. Can't understand why the Air Force wasted their money on this thing. So I was not particularly happy when I got my assignment. But by the time I checked out in the airplane, started flying it, I started to really like it. By the time I left to go to war, I won't say I was in love with it, but I was proud I was flying it. And the more I flew it, the prouder I was. But our mission, since we only flew in North Vietnam, made us extremely vulnerable. We didn't have much, milk runs. Maybe on a bad weather day, you'd do a recce down in Route Pack 1 north of the DMZ. And that was pretty easy, but I was on my 47th mission and 31 of them were in the Hanoi area. I'd already beaten the odds 2 or 3 times. I never got to meet Colonel Oles, but he was the commander of the 8th Wing over at Ubon when I was flying, and they flew MiG-Cap on several missions into Hanoi that I was on. But I did not meet him personally until after the war.
So, obviously your missions were into dangerous territory, and I've read that, I won't get into reasons, but because of our unwillingness to stop the stuff coming in from the Russians, they had a very robust anti-aircraft defense system. So I imagine every mission was just tremendously high risk.
There were a few missions like the when we would do road recce or just general reconnaissance missions down in the lower route packs 1, 2, or 3 that were all, you almost say, were fun. Get out and roam around and see the countryside while you were doing it. But yes, when we went into the Hanoi area, the expression was when you got up there, your ass belongs to Uncle Sam, put those bums on target. And there were some missions that everything is there. We went in, at the time I was there, we'd make run-ins at low altitude around 1,500, 2,000 feet to try to stay out of the radar for the SAMs and the radar guns. Therefore, small arms fire was a risk that you had to avoid. But yeah, in the pattern that we flew, we'd pull up to about 14,000 feet and then come back in on a dive. And that's when the radar could pick you up. Where the first month or so I was there, where the MiGs would be laying for us right over Hanoi. And one mission I was on, we had MiGs going up with us in the pop. We had 105s and MiGs and 105s and MiGs, and SAMs going off and flak all around. I don't know who the MiG leader was that day, but he wasn't too smart. Oh, you could almost watch a gauge drop. I used to laugh. Say, put your hand on the floorboard, you could feel it going by. I'm trying to think. Typical fuel consumption was probably about 3,000 gallons or pounds an hour. The afterburner jumped to a little over 6,000.
So you didn't do that unless you meant it.
No. The best I did, I guess I got it about 1.3 or 4. But that's an interesting story if you're going to put on.
Yeah, go ahead. I'd love to hear it.
We were on a mission on Sunday afternoon in a railroad yard just northeast of Hanoi across the Red River Bridge there. And my flight leader, we were the #1 bomb flight, and there was a flak suppression flight ahead of us, and the #4 guy there had been hit and was going down under the clouds, about a 2,000 foot level layer. And so my flight leader says, I'm going to follow him down. So that meant me leading the mission out. And about the time I got out and got to recover right across Hanoi, and that's where we were in afterburner, accelerating out of there and jinking. A SAM went off so close that I flew through the colored cloud, which only lasted a couple of seconds. And I came back and I told him that day, I said, I think the biggest damage I did was going across Hanoi supersonic, blowing out all the windows in town. But as we got out, I was starting to climb out, and a fellow from up here in Georgia who happened to be in my squadron too, I recognized his voice, called me and he says, single 105, 18 east of 97, shake it, you got a MiG on you. So I did a split S right down through the cloud layer, pulled up, and when I did and looked out, there was a mountain ridge on either side of me out here, at least 500 feet higher than me. And I came back out of there rather subdued, to say the least. And I remember I got back and went through debriefing. And intelligence at that time, if you had a tough mission, they'd pull out this bottle of bourbon, old Overholzer, I remember, and they'd give you a shot. And I threw that one down, and I started telling him about the mission. He pulled us, you like another? And I said, yeah. And I says, can I have another one? I had my third shot of bourbon. We got through the debrief, and I looked at my watch. It was about 5 minutes till evening church time. And I went down to the chapel. I knew this Methodist minister was down there, and I leaned up and right up in his face. I said, it was a close one today, but he got me back here. I said, you think I'll be okay here? He says, you'll be glad you're here. Come on in. But that was probably my most exciting day, other than being shot down.
I guess a day you probably don't enjoy talking about, but I hope you will, July 5th, 1967. And maybe I'd love for people who, particularly young people, to understand what your day was like. Not just the fact that you were shot down, but your usual day and preparing for a mission. And all you can remember about that day would be
I
wonderful.
don't have any trouble talking about it. July the 5th, 1967 was obviously a very special day, and two or three things led up to that, in that I had just been appointed or signed as the executive officer of the squadron, and we were having an inspection. We had a new commander. He asked me to do a check around to make sure we were ready and get acquainted myself. So I had not flown for 3 days. I had sat as spare when they needed, but I didn't get off. And I remember on the night of the 4th of July, I wrote a letter home, and I said, well, I missed the fireworks again today, but Fergie promised me tomorrow for sure. And sure enough, I went out the afternoon mission. I dropped that report off on the commander's desk and headed out. And later on, talking to people in Hanoi when we were together, almost without exception, all of us acknowledged there was something different about the way we felt that day. We couldn't put our finger on it, but it wasn't like a normal day. And I kept trying to think the whole time, what have I forgotten? What did I do or not do, or what? And as it turns out, obviously it was that sense, I guess, of the impending, what was imminent. But in my case, I was the number 4 airplane in a second flight on a railroad siding right up near the Chinese border. And just as we started our roll-in of the first flight, there was a call for MiGs about 20 miles west of us at our altitude. So as number 4, that's part of my responsibility. So I took a quick look out there to see if I could pick them up. And I didn't see anything, but when I looked back, my leader had already started rolling in, and the flak was so thick that I couldn't see down. So I had to stay up till some bombs went off and I could see the target. Consequently, I had to adjust my roll-in. Instead of being in a 45-degree dive, I was probably at least 60 coming straight down, and I had to adjust the altitude, drop the bombs. And I flew through 3 levels. They were laying out flak at level 3, about 3,000 feet apart. I made it through the 3 of the levels of flak. But just as my bombs came off, I felt a hit. I'd been hit twice before, so it was unmistakable. But this time, my procedure was, when I dropped the bombs, was hit the afterburner, pull out, let that give me the thrust, and start my jinking. Well, when I hit the afterburner, the airplane just did a tumble. And I came back out, it stabilized, and I remember this distinctly. Boy, that'd be a heck of a ride at Coney Island. I'd never been there, but I'd heard about it. So I relaxed, put the burner back in, get out of here, and the airplane just started flipping and tumbling. And I couldn't see out because of the flames, but I was still going to try to make it as close as I could to the water. We'd come in off the Gulf, and we're going back out that way. But about that time, the camera up in front of the dash under the windscreen broke loose, and I had to duck as it went over my head. And as I was looking, the instrument panel just started crumbling, and the airplane was starting to come apart. So I leaned back, put myself in position, pulled the handles, and I remember thinking nothing happened. And boom, it's gone. And I had a very interesting experience in that I grayed out. I couldn't see anything, didn't feel anything. I was just kind of floating. I thought I was dead, literally. And then I started feeling some pressure, and my vision started coming back, and I could see a little bit of green. And then all of a sudden I could see the canopy of, the tops of the trees, and I'm coming down. And I looked up to see if the canopy was open, and it was just starting to blossom. And I reached up to get it, and when I put my hands on the risers, they collapsed. I was sitting on a log on the ground. And that all took less than 2 seconds, because had those automatic systems that got me out, pull to shoot, not worked, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. I figure I went out inverted in negative G's and maybe even ejected toward the ground. I don't know. No idea. But somebody up there was looking out for me that day again, like the day that over Hanoi supersonic.
Lieutenants coming in behind us. Yeah. They just finished the 100th mission. Actually, they got cycled through to go back up to rescue one of our other pilots that was shot down earlier. So they've just got 101 mission. And we're real proud of them because, first of all, not many lieutenants fly the 105. And secondly, to get 100 missions in it is outstanding, we think. So we're going to meet them here at the end of the runway and take them on up to the parking space, give them a bottle of champagne, and I imagine they're 3 happy boys. When all is said and done, you really cannot adequately relate a war. War is too potent, too personal. War is living and laughing and crying and dying. It has always been the man who fights who can best report on war, if you will. True, his story may be confused, sometimes harsh, sometimes boisterously non-committal, but it is real. This is one segment, one small insight into our present war. This is the 105's story of fighter-bomber pilots flying daily over the armed camp of North Vietnam during the month of November in 1966. These are the men of the 388 Tactical Fighter Wing, and in particular, men of the 421st Fighting Cavalier Squadron.
Well, what did they tell it? He said, well, how do I tell if they're friendly? I said, well, they come up with their hands over their heads, they'll be friendly. He said, no, one of these guys got a gun. The guy said, well, how far are you from it? He said, well, it's right here by me. He said, well, it must be friendly. That's how I feel, I'm on it. Well, I better kill myself on there, so you are true. Jeez. Oh, gee, too. I didn't know where he was for a while. And then they saw a Lordy B. Behind us, all right, that's 2 inches off the radio. I'm going to be an instructor pilot. Where? 238 Williams Air Force Base, Arizona. I figure I'll arrive there and I'll be real quiet, all that, and I'll go in and all the students will nudge each other and when they meet me, and I'll be their instructor and they'll fly with me and they'll nudge each other and say, what kind of Rasmus do before he came here? And they'll be all quiet and no one will know until finally there'll be graduation and we'll show up in mess dress, and then I'll be with my air medals and my DFC and my Silver Star and my Commendation Medal and my Vietnam Service Medal and all this stuff all the way across. And I'll walk in with a slight limp. And they'll say, tell me about it. And I'll say, oh, it was nothing. It was nothing. But then for a week after, every time I crawl in the airplane, I get in, I'll pull my leg in and I'll wince a little. And I'll say, what is it about that? Oh, it's just about war injury. 45, 44. Right, 45, 44, 45. How did this year go? Pretty good? Yeah. Good. How is that? Well, it's 42, 43. What's the house? One good one? One color? One to the left. Finally made the board. 99 hardwoods to go. Oh, the board will swap to that. I got to put them on. I have to remember 90. You already got it. So you're going to get two today, huh? One more, I'll be able to make it go. We'll be able to hold it right. Just for here about 6 months, in Africa, about 6 months to tour. Get two years about that. What's that? It took an hour to get out of the pepper shopping done for you back. Now you really got right. Also, can't tell anyone. Yeah, 4 people, looks like, except by the end of this month. They should be home for their families for Christmas. Think you're gonna make home for Christmas? Yeah. 67. This wing, even though we're roughly 100 miles from any sort of civilization, morale is high here. I've noticed that. The men know what they're doing and why they're here. Well, if we still have to be over here, I'll come right back and go eat us me. You come right back and do another hitch. You bet I will. I feel we have a reason to be here. As to read, some special agent. I feel that we didn't just take some mission and stop it here. We've been fighting in our backyard. Enjoy some of the things I'm over here for. Such as the American way of life. I served in World War II in the Southwest Pacific. Served during Korea. Well, when I leave here, I still have some time to do it, sir. I'll make it through. We don't have a morale problem. Here we sit out here in the middle of a strange country and away from everything that's familiar to us. And I'm not speaking of pilots now, I'm talking to the maintenance people. But there is no morale problem. Of course, the pilots couldn't have a morale problem. There's always something going. There's always something going. It's never dull. If there is a factor involved with a morale problem, it's fatigue. Yes, I personally try to discourage it. Man has put in 100 missions to go with North Vietnam, to go home, get a rest, and come back. However, I have one pilot here that just insisted on taking another 100. He's here, his name is Lieutenant Victor. Yeah, I want to come back down. How come you get to stay here? Hey, work hard, he's going to stay here with me. Yeah, Mommy wouldn't have had any part to do with that. Okay, there's the deal, you know. You're very, let's face it, you know, if you like somebody well enough to be married, hell, you don't want to be wait for a year or 8 months or anything like that. How are you going to explain to a wife that you have put in for a concurrent tour, you know, that you're going to take flying over her? It wouldn't happen. No, like, wait, it's like, that's why I'm sticking around. Or that's where I go. Nothing going for me back in the States. The flying's good. You don't have all the little nitpicking rules and regulations you have to put up with, especially in 2 months ago. It's still a lot better than it is back there now. I just, you know, I enjoy it. And, I mean, it's the kind of deal like everybody says, yeah, waving a flag, but I'm not. But at the same time, you know, where are you gonna stop at, you know? Where's colonies are you gonna wave where in the Philippines, or in Australia, or San Francisco, or Des Moines, Iowa, you know? You can stop it here, or wait till somewhere later on. I don't think most of the people think about that. They're like me, you know, what happens, you know? If I get shot down. To me, that never get me anyway. Hey, at least you were pretty mean to save your life. Yeah. They couldn't stand that anymore. Our bombing objectives, I believe, can be very distinctly divided into 2 phases. Our interdiction program conducted in the southern portion of North Vietnam in an attempt to deny movement of the enemy into South Vietnam, and our strategic, if you will, objectives in the northern portion of North Vietnam in terms of attacking principal lines of communications, the northeast and the northwest railroads, which comprise the two most major railroads in North Vietnam, also POL installations and other military supply and storage areas located in the delta regions of North Vietnam. I just finished that flight here that's getting ready, the big Eagle will take off. We've got over 50 airplanes involved in this strike force, and it was going to be a big raid up near the Hanoi area, but the weather's bad. Now they're going to various other areas. A spare job, for every 4 airplanes we launch one spare off the end of the runway. In case one of the airplanes that we're having trouble with, they can fill in any 4 position, any one of the 4 positions. He's usually a leader, so in case the leader aborts, he can fill in that spot. You see that flight taking off now, and the airplane standing by is the spare. He'll be coming back up like these probably pretty soon. Spare is not a bad job because you do launch quite a little of time. We like to fly and fight before. That's why we have a spare out there, because if we didn't, we'd never get another airplane up in time. It was about 250 or so. God might send his card. Thanks. Where? Oh, I saw something funny down there. I see. You got it. You got Bob and Town. How do you lead it? I didn't. No, I got a nice big bridge there. 2%. I was carrying about 2% back. And when that guy kept piling MiGs, we hadn't caught up with that flight in front of us yet, man. And I'm still going full blow rate about 620 degrees. Yeah. This is not the answer. Don't worry, I was watching your 6 fly. Thanks a lot. I call you a favorite game. I was watching it too. Well, that's when I was on my run, that's why I saw all the sparking coming from. All the spike flashes were coming from right around where you got the bump. So we came right into this area right over here. No. We're Route 6. That's the real point. Well, where were we like, where was that flight that was calling out all the MiGs? That wasn't a flight that was calling me. That was some guy. Yeah, that's the 121 that sits out over the over there was somebody up there saying, drop, along that road to this, that, and the other. Some guy was saying, there's a signal over there. There goes, yeah, but they're all identified as primate. I saw one, yeah. There was a gang of airplanes up in there, I'll tell you. Correct, they were all. Not to me, like before we got there, the guys actually saw that they were calling them out. Four squadrons in it. They are all located up here in the, I'll call a quadrangle. The 469th here on your right, fighting bold. The left here, 421st, the 34th, and the 13th. Spot 26. Aircraft 148 marks the beginning of a 421st Tactical Fighter Squadron area, which I spend most of my time. They have 20 aircraft assigned to the outfit. As you can see, they're all painted up in different ways. The primary identification feature is the red GCA deflector on the nose gear strut. As a matter of the 105 and my particular acquaintance on the doggone thing, first associations, I guess, from a number of years back, I could care less about the airplane. I didn't think it was ever made to fly, and it certainly, from a maintenance standpoint, wasn't very reliable. Southeast Asia has changed my mind. On the left here is 8. That's ground support equipment. We have about 300 pieces of it here. That's worth $6 million. The 105 is a very complicated weapon system. It's got radar, gun sights, electronics, all sorts of complicated electronic equipment in it. This equipment here supports the operation of the 105. This is thinking back at the complication of the weapon system. You like to know that it takes 40 man hours of maintenance people to support 1 hour of this airplane in the air. That's how complicated it is. However, it's the best airplane in the airports over here today to do the job. This flight line at night is a pretty active place. There's more work done at night actually than there is in the daytime. Daytime is completely taken off with launching and recovering airplanes. Don't have much time for anything else. Of course, there's a turnaround. There's a lot of bomb loading for the second go around noon, but nothing like at night. Put it on one airplane, it doesn't come to me, so you have to take it off and put it on another one. Pretty frustrating. They get it done somehow. I don't know how, but they do. We have a remarkable delivery rate here. I can't remember the last time I got a maintenance non-delivery. We're always getting it. They do a real bang-up job that time. That a new drunk we had in the water? Right. They said sports shirts, not sporting shirts. Over there, front. In your what? You know what? Oh, thank you. Oh, I'll be nice. No, we're not getting on me. I'll probably go around and take everybody. We've got 10. My sister. Oh, hello, right there. Oh, I go to Comcast. I would. Make sure I no care. My love waits there. In San Francisco, beyond the blue and windy sea, Remember, it's close. That's where the adrenaline starts pumping. Well, the airplane's working hard. You got the tanker. And, except for the go, they'll make you going. That's your last chance. The first flight goes through the tanker. We stay with the tanker. There'll be 4 flights on the tanker. And everybody will look to the tanker and go up. It takes 30,000 a time. And you stay with it. And you stay wherever. After everybody gets full, you restore. And you go up to your drop-off point. And through the anchor, your drop-off point, you go to the top off. It takes 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 pounds. The point is that you can get 4 airplanes through the top off just it doesn't fly. It takes a couple of minutes per airplane. But it's going to a race on big refueling. Why it takes quite some time. So consequently, if you put 12 flights on the tanker and expand immediately, you get to the drop-off point where the tanker has to turn back before you get to start flight full. Plus the other argument there, that everybody leaves full, or close to full. A lot of our was to observe what's going on around, what they're moving, where they're moving, to how the bridge is, what kind of condition they're in. So we do need to allow area where cloud cover is. And up north, where the Simon wagon is heavy, you can't operate in so around those build-ups where you're going around the clouds because the Simon can right straight through them and hit you. And incidentally, the airplanes we have lost to sand in these conditions. So we have to avoid. Well, maybe not. I still have light speed though. I want to tell you, I got water right away all the time, so yeah, I got light speed plus stuff. Right. Remember what the weather was on the tops of it? I think we were reporting about 2,000. Yeah, we went through a layer, and then it was about from 10 to 9, and then from 9, the ground in areas that we played, but there was a scattered layer in there about 5 or 6. Yeah. Got look through on there. This is 24. Sorry, we lost 2 today. Okay, this 1, 2, 24, and 1 is 25. Okay. Now this is a CBU flight. This is what's the second flight? Loading with the this is flight still tagging. And then drive up there slow so you hit the red. I mean, so you have to think about it. With the rail and die, everything, so we're going to hit right on down that GOT point. It only worked out quickly, except the weather. Our indicates a small high pressure area centered just about over Hanoi, which should make for fairly good weather, except for restricted visibilities and haze. Cut to listeners, don't be the weather on progress tomorrow, the last 5 minutes into the target. You start to. When it's just to the northwest and west, it's going to be the real pretty quarter. So we're doing the same way. Yeah, if everything works the same way tomorrow, we're good. Get the weather breaks, yeah. That's what we're doing. So tomorrow's topic, the Young Bend Railroad. It's the largest railroad in all of North Vietnam. Function controls all the traffic coming in from the Northeast Railroad and the Northwest Railroad into Hanoi. Then controls all traffic going south. It's located 5 nautical miles north of Hanoi. Its defenses include heavy concentration of AAA, and there are 26 known SAM sites in the area. Roscoe is brought here by a pilot from Kadena, who was temporarily assigned to the wing. When the pilot was shot down up north, Roscoe sort of became everybody's dog. The only dog allowed unbaked. Now Roscoe's a free agent and goes everywhere. Sort of a tramp with a big heart. But lots of guys, for instance, don't feel right unless he's sitting there in a commander's chair during the mission briefing. They say if he sleeps, it's going to be an easy mission. If his ears perk up, watch out. The winds there from the surface to 5,000 feet along the coast are going to run about 25 knots out of the northeast. Get out of an aircraft report right over the mountain there, he says this morning, just about a McGear Pass at 5,000 feet, he had a wind of 030 at 40 knots. Nobody dare say anything against 105. And you hear stories and wild tales and so forth. And well, I learned to love this old bird at It really does the job. And there's not another airplane that we've got that can do this. Very successfully. Very successful. Countermeasure airplanes. I love the speed, power. It will get there and get you out. We hear an awful lot about surface-to-air missiles. They're called SAMs, or referred to as SA-2s. This is a picture of an SA-2 site situated in the immediate Hanoi area. A close-up of this particular target would look something like this. Very clearly, you can observe the presence of SA-2 missiles. And in this area, we find the radar band which controls the firing of the missiles and also tracks the aircraft along with providing guidance to the SA-2 missile. Our pilots are constantly faced in flying into North Vietnam with missile firings along with extremely heavy anti-aircraft. I kind of call it the dry throat mission myself. Usually I come out bound for the target and I'm just kind of sucking that water bottle dry throat. But the only thing I can really say about the Hanoi area is about the time you start coming off the tanker on the way up there, you begin getting butterflies in your stomach naturally, and then you begin settling down to the task at hand of navigating and finding your way up there. And then once you arrive in the area, you're generally pretty busy, and although at times you're pretty scared when you have to roll in on something up there, especially when you look down and see nothing but a black cloud or a white cloud down below you. It's about as scary a mission as I've ever been on. I think it tries you to just about the maximum on the missions. If you can get between a ridge between you and that radar site, they can guide missiles. It's just when you get down in the dump in the flat line, it's a 30-mile ring around the city of Hanoi. It's a fair. Because it's flat, you have no protection. And I don't know how true it is, but it's the most heavily defended place in history of aerial warfare. I've been there and I believe it. Everybody wear your flak belts today, guys. I don't want. Drop flag. All right, well, that's it off. Try wear your flak belt, actually. I'm coming around how much in a rush. I'm always the way school. You don't want to go. There's no way. All right? No way. You got those flags you're going to tie between the wings? Or one on each? It's not. Oh, that's what option about it. Now, first of all, we have our boss is the radio, which is the most important item we have. Our second item, I would say, is flares. The third is your weapon, and the compass, and the mirror for signaling, and find direction. The most important one, for go out, is the beeper. I hear yours, too. Yeah. Who was that? Oh, it's mom, good God? Oh, no. But, what is Mark? Well, that's fine. Who belongs to those 140? That's good. 140. I'll kick my purse out. Okay, I won't take your purse. Oh, where you? I don't know. about the second river, I have 4,500 pounds. I ride down the whole, two 412 here to get the rat. We'll cross the river now, field. Red limit, left, field 4 here. Don't fly, got a flat down, drop that middle side. Please outside. What am I going to try to do? No contact, this is late, about 35 miles per turn point. I do fly. Okay, my way is going to start a left turn and come away just so that we get a little right below me. Bring a clear view to both through at turn point. I'm turning right now. Field. They're going up the bottom. Bring it blind, we got a bunch of low at 2. What was that for, Eagle? 12. No going, south here. Roger, I'm going that way off right. I see you loud and clear. You close, we got no right under us, right under us. Roger, let's go get it. I got a couple of dudes right in front out there. Okay, I'm mixing it up with 4 notes. Okay, I'll do that. Let's go back to the I have a 2, strangers look like 105, got it 9 o'clock time, no sweat. Okay, and Joe's got a contact down in the area. Pull up about from the globe and try to pump. Let me see, get me lined up. Okay, keep following up. Okay. I'm going to let out, down. I'll stop you from what's going on up. Okay. Have you done 11? Run! Take the time! Take the time! Run! Take the time! Take it down, Phil. Which way now? Go up the line for 11 o'clock. We can take it down. All right, get back there, take it down. Well, that's all right. I think we're all right for the time being. Pretty well, that's good. Roger, I'm going 240 blow, right out the book. Oh, well, here's black things over there, Mr. McGill. There's 3 of them, they're shooting at us, too. Right up on that hill, right from the left side of the... Right up there, you pass through the top of that hill, you'll be able to, you know, when you could let him go, I just pushed, and then I looked out, and oh, geez, I went through the high. 6,500 feet, 55 or something, 70 feet. So I didn't go ahead and push, and then, you know, you take that hill on your left right there and get that one. So, oh, there's another one. Got another one. That's it. That's the deal. Go out. Run. And work it out. Well, kind of a problem. I hope they put that on go up and put those fuel oils out, but that's fuel oils out. Everybody wants to go to try. What's that? What? So go up this. Well, I just thought we were put me on that, you know. Look, how about those 6 times and they put up in the hill, now they'll chill for look, how about let people? And who's going to win the argument? Yeah. Hey, you don't get my shot at me. Well, that's right. We've been very successful here in taking pilots from SAP, ABC, training command, as long as they go to one of the tactical schools, and one of the 105 schools in Attack Air Command, back in the States and receive roughly 70 hours in the 105, they do a good job here. Of course, we don't start them out as flight leaders. They start either the number 2 or 4 position, and they set their own rate of progress. Well, go to Phil. Quite a problem. You know, well, after not flying for a couple months, you'll feel good, Ed. We talk about it a little bit. Sure. Did you understand what we were trying to do when he was doing the wrecking? How he was going back and forth on the road? And I was in that wasn't really what I was in the hood of it. He was too close. You said, oh, you mean when I was, when you were wrecking earlier? Yeah, I was trying to play one. Kind of like this one. Yeah, well, no, you press on, I'll stay away from you. Yeah, there's no problem. But you see the position that you want. You don't want to get down like this because you're getting the flag. You stay up like this, and then when he disappears, just try to go high on him. Then when he reverses, take a look up. See, every time you look out, you look right down there and see your wingman. That's what you want to do. You don't do outside, you don't want to get too high because if you turn into you, that's what happened to me that one. Yeah. Turned into me when I was high, and I got no place to go. Don't get too high and don't get too low. When you get too low, if they shoot at him, and you're lower, they'll probably hit you. But at the same time, when you get too high, and he turns into you, just like that says you get it blocked out. I told you how complicated the weapon system is. So it only can be effectively operated, utilized against the enemy by 2 professionals. And our pilots are professional pilots. We do have a few youngsters out of the training school, but most of our pilots have been in the Air Force 10 to 12 years or longer. And in fact, we have some grandfathers who are fighting this war. They're going to do that 13, 15. We're drop out here, 18, 10, right? But we don't have enough fuel after leaving that tank to make so full run good. Let's look at the cloud. My best day was the 5th of July when I attacked and destroyed 4 SAM sites in one 25-minute mission. And this came about because in escorting the strike flights, 2 SAM sites came up on our way in. We had to attack these boys to turn them off the air to get into the target area. While in the target area, another SAM site came up, threatening the strike force, and of course we attacked and got him. And then on the way back out, another SAM site came up to block our exit out of the target area, which was about 15 or 20 miles north of Hanoi. And we only had 1 part of rockets and 20-millimeter cannon ammunition remaining. But he fired 2 SAMs at us, and we managed to acquire him visually and put the rockets on him and machine gun him out of commission. This was the best day I've had, and I don't care to go through another one of those. A little too much for an old man. No way. I've come up with one thing that, in my own mind, makes the Air Force a good organization. And was one of the reasons I stayed in it after I got into fighters. And that's the people that are in it. And I think this has been most vividly demonstrated to me over here. I don't think you can get more diversified type of an organization with people with diversified backgrounds. We have some old heads from Korea, some young heads from the academy, and we got the world's greatest B-52 fighter pilot over there, Bob Loken, and a few other people from SAC, ADC, and 12th Air Force headquarters and things like that. And we made a pretty good organization. I think we kind of put the squadron, if we could tell it to the world, we put it on the map. And I'm very happy to have served with each and every one of you troops. So if I could certainly be able to get down south with working 100s or F-5s or A1s or shoes, I don't care, as long as it's Coast Air Support. If I can swing that, I'm going to just try to go maybe back to States TV wide upgrade down there. If not, I'll stick around and fly an 01 or an A1. Check you out right up north, you know. You're about to line up like that. Oh, no. Yeah, but I've been going paid for 16 years. What's my job? As of right now, I've got 3 children. I've got a 6-year-old boy and a 11-year-old girl, and a 17-year-old girl. So, just watching kids grow up. So forth. I don't care if they're North Vietnamese kids or South or whatever. I have no desire to go bomb villages. So we're not children at all. I've been very careful about it. I'm very careful. I think most of the pilots in the squadron are very careful with where we put the bombs so that they don't accidentally hit women and children and sort of thing. I think it was right. I don't know anyone that's going to go and drop a bomb in a village because that's not doing anything for the war. We want to get the targets military important. Well, it was on the 13th of September, we were flying a bounty mission North Vietnam. We just discovered a bunch of missiles on transporters. Just finished dropping orders on them. We're looking for something that strayed and found a flank site. And we decided to make a pass. And I took a direct hit from 37 or 57. Called I was hit, leading near my radio transmission because number 4 man thought I was a missile. Called me out as a SAM. And the number 3 man said, no, that's 2, he's on fire. And I got about a minute and 10 or 20 seconds flying down out of the aircraft, got about 40 miles away from where I was hit. And we had a minor explosion, lost hydraulic pressure. The aircraft pitched down. And I ejected, almost uncontrolled situation. About 545, 550 knots, 2 negative G's, that's when I hurt my ankle. Caught my foot, the ejection process getting out. Everything else was uneventful. I pulled the chute open, down landed in the trees, got my radio out, talked back to the flight. And we said the rescue aircraft was on the way. It took him about 45 or 50 minutes to get to me, and about 5 or 6 minutes to pick me up. Well, that's good. You get up in the 90s, and you got 10 to go, and you say, well, I'm going home pretty soon, so I got to tell these guys something. So you go lay in bed at night, and you think of things to tell them. And the runs, wait a minute. I'm going to tell you guys something right now. This is my speech, and I'll be it's the only I have a 3-hour speech prepared. And something I'm damn glad to have, besides working with all you guys, your names here. I don't really need this picture frame. We'll do it. What's the name? I'm gonna remember you guys. But, yeah, I remember you, because those are guys you remember, the guys you fought with.
Any place you want to be.
Well, the first thing, obviously, that I did once I was on the ground, sitting on the log, my emergency beeper was going off. Get that off so I can talk. But I couldn't get up to it. I couldn't get it cut off. I didn't think. I realized after the fact that I had, because two others had been shot down, and their beepers were the ones that were going off, blocking things. But I made an immediate call. Told them I was down safe. I'd check in an hour. That's really optimistic. But sitting on the log looking down was kind of ironic. I looked down and looked at the tree. This is just like North Georgia. Those hills, same kind of scrub trees and pine tree and running around, the ground's gravelly. Then all of a sudden it dawned on me, these ain't going to be friendly North Georgia mountaineers. Everybody I see now may be looking to kill me. So I started trying to get rid of stuff. My chute was caught in the trees. I couldn't get it down. My survival kit that comes out separately had banged down, and I couldn't get it open. But I could get the side open that had the jungle hat with a mosquito net and a bottle, 2 cans of water. And I pulled out the water, stuck them in my flight suit, put the hat on, threw my helmet down the hill, hoping that would make them think I'd gone that way. And I started up the hill, which was the instructions or recommendations from survival school. And as I got to almost to the top of the hill, and I could see a path out here that I was going to go to it, I hesitated just long enough. I think actually my G-suit got caught in some brambles and kept me from pushing these bushes open. And a Vietnamese ran across closer than 4 feet away. The only thing, he was in a hurry or didn't look my way. So that caused me to look around a little bit and the path, and then I saw these field wires across the way. And I leaned up and looked. I'd come down right in the gun ring. There was a gun sight down here about 100 yards and another one over here about 100, 150. And so I reconsidered my actions at this point, don't get too carried away. But I managed to get across that path without leaving a track with the boots. And I thought if I got over on the other side and down the hill, I could hide out for that hour and check in and maybe get picked up, get out of here. And I didn't realize when I got across, all the brush was over here. I was in grass, maybe a foot, 1.5 feet high. And when I got to the edge and looked down, it was a drop off into a bog. I wasn't going anywhere in that direction. So I sat down and opened one of the cans of water, and at that point I was so thirsty I didn't think there was enough water around. I took 2 sips and I thought it was going to come out my ears, all the psychological, the shock effects. But I managed to drink it, forced it down, threw the can away. And about that time, I heard voices were gathering up over here along the trail. And they were pointing and talking. And I'd heard some shots and hollering back and forth. They'd obviously found my parachute and helmet. And so they'd eliminated that side. They just really were going to come over here. And they did, and they came out. And I did this and tried to get anything white out of sight and hide down. But it turned out I wasn't going to hide under anything. They walked up and tapped me on the shoulder and welcomed me to North Vietnam. The ones that came out and got me were actually militia. They were in civilian clothes. One of them had a rifle.
I don't mean to interrupt, but these are regular North Vietnamese.
No, these civilian. They're like militia.
Oh, okay.
They're in civilian clothes. I don't know how they fit into the system right there then, but like I say, one of them had a rifle, and they started stripping me down. And of course, when I got my pistol out over here, one of them pulls it out and looks at it. And I don't know why, it was just a sixth sense. I just happened to glance up just as he was starting to come across and hit me in the head, and I ducked and missed him. And the guy with the rifle leaned across and hit him with a butt in his chest and knocked him back. And I remember thinking, you and I are going to be friends. I don't know about the others, but I like you. But they packed me down. Well, they started me, took off my boots, stripped out everything out of the flight suit. One amusing thing, I carried a half a pack of Salems because we'd been told that Ho Chi Minh liked those, and if Ho Chi Minh did, most everybody else probably would. And I carried some Winston cigarettes too. They pulled the cigarettes out, looked at them, crumbled them up, and threw them away. And I said, well, so much for intelligence. But they started walking me, and I realized if I walked very far barefooted, my feet were not going to be in a condition to do anything else. So as we started down the trail, I started watching, and I saw a root coming up, and I hooked my foot in it and fell over and convinced them that I'd hurt myself. And I got them to carry me all the way down the side of the mountain. And we stopped in a little village. They put me in a house in the back corner on a bed. And I was there, I'd say, between 30 minutes and an hour, and he came in, tapped out, and walked back out. And I got in this, I called it a safari wagon. It was bigger than a Jeep, but not as big as you see safaris nowadays, but open vehicle with a canvas top. And they put me in the back seat, one guy on each side. They're holding my arms like this, so I wasn't tied up. But I looked up as the fellow on my left in English said, "You're now the prisoner of the Chinese Liberation Army." And what I saw in front was a picture of Mao Zedong and Lin Pao, head of the premier and the head of the People's Army. And I couldn't put my hand up and do the Marine salute, but I said something, well, okay, you really did it to yourself this time. Because I figured I was gone to China because we were that close to the border. I learned over the next 24 hours that that's why the gun sights were so good down there. The Chinese were running them all. And what we had rolled in over, literally, that got us was what we considered probably the best gun sight in North Vietnam. Of course, now I knew why. And later, in '79, when Deng Xiaoping came to this country, he acknowledged that they had 300,000 regular troops in North Vietnam for the war. So that's what they were doing. And it was also why we had been briefed about 2 or 3 weeks before that there would be no attempted rescues in the buffer zone right up near the border. That they finally acknowledged that those were the Chinese. And I'd have to say that overall, I was well treated with them. They brought me something to eat. They wanted me to do a radio broadcast, which I declined with no pressure. And that night, the commandant came in. They introduced him as the commandant. And through the translator said that if I cooperated with them, that I would be treated well, and I'd be taken to Beijing and be treated well. And I declined that kind offer also, because in 1967, Beijing and the moon were about the same distance from Atlanta, Georgia, as far as I was concerned. I did not know, I should say, that we had an F-104 pilot that had been shot down in September of '65 who was already in Beijing. And he came home when we did, and I introduced myself to him and told him my opportunity to meet him. He said, "You made a good choice." He spent 7.5 years in solitary. And after during the 24 hours with the Chinese, when I knew, they took me around the next day to various gun sites. We'd stop someplace, and about 8 or 10 guys would come out in uniform and line up. And I called him the cheerleader. The head guy would get out his little red book, and he'd read and chant and read, and he'd chant. And the translator then would say, "The U.S. will surely be defeated. The Vietnamese people will surely be victorious." Okay, that's nice. And one thing out of that, which really surprised me, was that almost every one of these guys had a camera. And when the chanting and cheerleading was all over, they'd all came around. They're all making pictures. So I had my fingers crossed that somebody was going to make a picture to get out, because I knew with my close call I was probably going to be reported as killed in action. So I cooperated with the picture making at that point as much as possible. But that afternoon, they took me up to a place, I guess it was either a subordinate or a corresponding headquarters, where I met some more regular Army. And I had, I guess you would say, a test of wills. They started the chanting again, and this time they wanted me to say it. And I told them, "No, I'm not going to say that." And one of the guys, I don't know what they smoked, but his eyes showed he had something more than issue, maybe even old Overholser. But he comes up with his rifle and puts the bayonet right under my chin and pops it up like that, while the translator's right here saying, "You must say it." And I wouldn't shake my head. I just did kind of like that. And after 2 or 3 times like that, and for him saying, "You must say it," I finally just did my lips tightly. I grimaced, said, "I'm not going to say that." And an officer obviously came up and got this guy to back off with a rifle. But I wasn't too sure there for a while, because I could see the rifle bore was clean. It was operable. But once that was over, back in the truck, back down to where I'd been before, in an area with a cave. That was my house right then. And they let me take a nap, and the commander came by and motioned like that, and went out and got in the truck and went down, and they turned me over to the North Vietnamese. And I remember when it made that offer and to go to Beijing, I said, "No, I want to go to Hanoi." The guy looked at me and just kind of shook his head. So when he turned me over, I leaned back out, and I wanted to shake hands with him, and we did, which is part of the story, because I hope to meet him later on. But anyway, the Vietnamese took me, blindfolded me, and took me down to, I'm pretty confident, to Kep Airfield. And I got a jet helicopter ride into Gelam, right downtown, and then a truck ride across the river to the big prison, Wallow. We referred to Wallow as the Hanoi Hilton,
Oh, that's the Hanoi Hilton.
but also
Yeah.
Hanoi Hilton tends to encompass all the camps. If you're in Hanoi, you're in the Hilton, although everybody, with few exceptions, processed through the big prison initially. And I went into New Guy Village there, learned I wasn't nearly as big, mean, and tough and strong as I thought I was. A couple of little fellas with a rope can get you to do and say things that you didn't plan to. And another one that got my arms up behind me for the better part of a day, convinced me to do some things. It had been opened in, I think, summer, June, July area of '66. And they called it the farm because out the edge of town, and you could hear the chickens and the animals and things around, and they named the buildings for things like the barn and the stable and the chicken coop. And it was an old French movie studio, so there was a theater there, that was obvious. They had a swimming pool, and one was a pool hall. So all those names fit in. But one of the guys that was living in front of the pool hall was a real character. One day, well, almost all the doors had these little openings in them. We call them peeps for short. And that's what they'd open up and look, check on you every morning and during the day or at night or whatever. One of the guards came by one day and did that. And after he walked off, this fella tapped his neighbor next door, says, "The first zoo I've ever been in where the animals look at the people." And from then on, it was the zoo. After the zoo, sometime during the summer of '70, the Vietnamese were readying a new facility for us at an existing army post out again to the west of Hanoi. And they had moved at least two groups in there earlier. One of them from the from the Santé prison where the raid took place later on. But it was the first time we had had compound living, so to speak. It was a big, long barracks that was divided into several rooms. Excuse me. But after a few days, we were all out together. They'd come in, just unlock the doors in the morning. We had to run to the place till siesta time, noonish, when they'd put us back in for a couple hours, and then we'd be back out. We had to run to the place till time to lock up to go to bed. We had a latrine area and a wash shower area. It definitely, it was not Hogan's Heroes, but it was so much better than anything we had had. We were getting sunshine, exercise, and then the Santé raid popped in, and that was about 6-7 miles away. We heard all the fireworks and see the airplanes and activity, and it scared the bejesus out of the Vietnamese. 2 days later, we were all loaded up, now taken back down to the big prison, Wallow, downtown. And they had opened up an area in the back that we knew was back there because when I was there before, we could hear people back in there. They'd been using it for political prisoners as well as South Vietnamese prisoners they'd captured. And these cell blocks were roughly 25 feet by about 55 or 60. And they had up to 100 to 120 South Vietnamese in each one, and there were 50 to 57 of us in each one. And on the concrete slabs, you had about that much space. And we then had guys laying on bedboards around on the floor. It was a crowded sardine can, but it was so nice to be with people that you'd only heard names of for several years, but now you got a face to go with them, a personality, and you got new people to talk to and new stories to hear. And it was actually fun for a few days. The first stop that I made when we went out to the zoo was in an area that we called the Annex. There was a series of buildings, I think there were 9 or 10 of them, where they stored the film from the studio. And in fact, there were old rolls of film around and so on. And I was in this group of 3 other F-105 pilots that had been shot down in early October. We'd gotten there in late October. But none of us knew anything about the tap code. We'd tried to talk across the wall or do something to the group that was next to us. There were 2 units in each building, but we weren't getting anywhere until the next spring, like March. This Navy lieutenant commander came in who knew the code. He had heard it, but he hadn't had a chance to use it, wasn't very good at it. But we were over trying to get the guys next door to respond. And they was tapping on the wall, and we were giving names, and they were giving their names back.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir, but how did the code work? Was it a form of Morse code, or?
No,
how'd you know which letter was what tap?
Well, the quick background is one of the very early Air Force officers, I think he was number 6 or 7, shot down, had been talking to a German POW, one of ours who was a German POW in World War II, and talked about this code. And Smitty asked him, what is it? Is it Morse code? No, it's a little matrix, 5 by 5. Excuse me. You drop out the letter K because you can get the same sound using a C. It's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, right on down. And to tap it, you tap, the first tap is for the row, and the second tap's for the column. So a B would be 1, 2, 2. And my initial W, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, dot, dot. A, dot, dot. And it seems cumbersome till you get it and get going. And once you get established doing it, it's like a lot of other things. You pick up a word from the context and you can get them to go on. And you can do it even faster than the telegraph key, I think. It was a lifesaver for us. But this first effort was really cumbersome. And when they were given their names back, this one came out, as I mentioned, there's no K, you use the C. It came back HICCE, something that doesn't make any sense. So you get him an error and get him to do it again. And about the third time, I don't know why it popped in my mind. I said HIC, and then all of a sudden I remembered saying, ask if that's Jim. And he went back, Jim, it came back, yes, and it's Jim Hickerson. And we had been fraternity brothers down here at Georgia Tech, stood side by side at initiation. He went in the Navy right away when I had that delay at Lockheed, but we'd seen each other about 2 years after. Both of us had our wings, but that would have been 10 years later, right there in Hanoi. But it was after he and I were then moved, as we call it, across the wall into the main prison. He was up in the barn, and I was in the pool hall. So we didn't communicate until about 2 years later, when we had what I call a fruit basket turnover, and he moved in next door to me and had taken some of the bricks out of the windows, and I got to lean in and shake hands with him. But then when we went out to the camp we call Faith, at the compound living, and then back into the other, we stayed together for the next 2.5, almost 2 years.
Thinking about the whole experience, you had to go through a range of, I shouldn't say you had to, I would imagine you went through a range of emotions.
Definitely.
In the beginning, you're a new opportunity for them. And then there must reach a point where the enemy says, we've done everything with this guy that's of value to us we can do, and now you just become, I shouldn't say just become, now you're a prisoner. When you think back, I mean, there had to be fear, boredom, hunger. I mean, how do you describe the stages of your imprisonment and what it did to you?
Well, first off was the startling realization that Air Force intelligence at survival school was out of touch with the real world. Because I asked the question as part of the process, what do you know about the POWs? You're probably aware of the Hanoi March that had happened in the summer of '66. Oh, and by the way, one of the Navy guys was shot down a couple of days before that happened, and they put him in. He got down and got the prison, and his quote was one of the famous ones. He said, "You guys do this very often?" But I was concerned about it, and the sergeant told me in the Philippines, "Oh, we've had reports of really good treatment up there." Because they've been seen out in town at night and in restaurants and theaters and stuff. And I'd been there about a week when I settled down enough, wish I could get my hands on that sergeant again. And also a Marine from Korea. But anyway, I was not prepared for the immediate torture, to be candid. Obviously, in survival school, we were taught name, rank, serial number, date of birth, according to the code of conduct, and evade further question to the best of your ability. But a German POW fellow, U.S. Air Force, who had been German POW when I was there, made the statement that if you have something that they want, they will get it. If you're by yourself, they'll get it out of you. If they're more than one, beware of things they'll do to play you off each other to get it. So once I got the name, rank, serial number, date of birth, and they said, what was your target? And I said, I don't know. And he said, what do you mean you don't know? And his English wasn't that good, but I could understand it. But I used the fact that I couldn't to get him to repeat things to buy time to think about what I was doing and saying. But anyway, he let me know right away that name, rank, serial number is not going to cut it. Oh, in fact, that's one of the humorous things. I told you about faking that injury up in the mountain to get them to carry me. I tried the same thing with the Chinese. They brought in a doctor. He checked me out. Said, no, you're okay. I said, no, you're okay. When I get to Hanoi, now I'm in a new venue. So when the interrogator comes in, he says, sit. And he was at a table with this light little gooseneck thing down here with a stool down. He says, sit. So I start like I'm going to hobble over there. And he looks up and he says, maybe you best actor in survival school, but now you in Hanoi. Sit down. That alerted me. This guy is not a dummy. He's in touch. And over the course of the night, he convinced me that their intelligence was immediately up to date. He asked me 2 questions over the course. One I'd been briefed on it the day before I was shot down, and one the day I was shot down as top secret. And he asked me why this happened. First one was why the 104, or the F4s no longer fly MiG cap. And I said, you mean they weren't up there today? I thought they were. And then he says, why can you not fly over Hanoi below 10,000 feet now? And we'd just been briefed on that day because there's a French delegation in town. So once that confirmed that I got to be serious about this. And when he was asking these questions, what was your target? I said, I don't know. I was a spare. I pulled in. I just followed them. Who else was in your flight? I don't know. Who's in your squadron? Well, I'm new. I've only been there a short time. He kept pressing for names, so I started coming up with guys from high school and from tech who were 4F or never in. I threw in some names of guys that finished 100 mission and gone home to be good. And I kept cranking this, and finally, after I don't know how many hours, and several times of tying me up and passing out and coming back to consciousness, he said, why you keep lying? I said, I'm not lying. They said, yeah, you lie. Same day we shoot down man 357 Squadron, tells us everything. And I thought about that a minute, and I said, well, if he tells you, why you ask me? He said, I want to hear you say. So we're back to the game again. Name, rank, serial number, write down all the same questions. And I remember from survival school, if you're telling a lie and somebody else telling the truth, the liar's in trouble. And I thought, oh gosh, if he really did tell them, I'm in trouble. So I started pulling my answers back to more factual things, but not quite as best I could, but sweating it out. And finally, when he quit about daylight, and this had started a little after dark the night before, and I got the day off, and I lay there, and they brought me some soup and rice to eat, and I got to thinking, he really conned me. He played all those things they told me about in survival school. He did it, and then I bought it hook, line. There ain't nobody else up here now. There you go. And I never heard any reference about another guy till I got to the zoo with those new 105 pilots. And one of the guys had been at the other base at Karate. And he said, I knew about you. You were shot down the same day as Ward Dodge. And he was a flight leader in another squad. I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah, he and another guy were shot down that day. They were 357th Squadron. So, yeah, they had the guy. They put him out as died in captivity about a week later. And once I got through the fear, and I mentioned the next day when I said he really hooked me, I got to shape up here and start earning my pay as a major in the United States Air Force. They came in the next morning and says, "Today you write your autobiography." I said, "No, I'm not going to do that. That's Dakota tongue cut. You won't write." He says, "I ordered you to." I said, "I don't take orders from you." None of these guys wore rank, so you didn't know who you were talking to really, but they all look like kids. As you know, Orientals tend to look much younger than they are for a long, long time. But we went through that, and they said, "Well, I bring in a camp commander. He orders you to write." I said, "Okay." So he goes, and I was really being this flippant and blasé, no kidding. So he comes back in a few minutes with a guy about his age, same size. He says, "Now, this is the camp commander." And I said to myself, "Oh, yeah, this was Saturday morning." I said, "Oh, yeah, these guys were out drinking beer last night." They said, "Oh, we're going to have some fun with a new guy." He says, he asked, "Will you write your autobiography?" I said, "Nope." They talked in Vietnamese. He says, "He asked you one last time?" I said, "No." He talked to me. He says, "He orders you to write your autobiography." I said, "I take my orders from the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force." He talked a little more in Vietnamese, and he says, "One more time?" I shook my head. And the camp commander looks up in very good English and says, "You will be very sorry." Got up and walked out. 2 or 3 minutes later, this big guy comes in, biggest Vietnamese I saw. And they put me on the ground, pulled my arms back up behind me. I couldn't do it again. My life depended on it. My palms were together behind my neck. I could scratch my neck. And they put Vietnamese handcuffs right there. And they walked out. And I thought, this ain't a big deal. And about 5 minutes later, my hands were numb, my arms were numb, and shortly my shoulders were numb, and pretty soon my chest was numb. And so I started walking around so I could keep myself alert and active, I thought. Next thing I knew, I'm laying on the floor. I'd obviously fallen like that. And I did that 3 or 4 times till I just gave up, quit trying to walk around. And during the mealtime, that mealtime came, he comes in with a bowl of soup and a plate of rice and holds it up. And I said, "Oh, good. We're going to get a break here, get something to eat." He holds it up, sets it on the table, and he does that. And I shook my head. He walked over, picked it up, walked out. Maybe they are serious about this. Okay, I'll lay here a while longer. So I guess I passed out off and on, because the next time, the afternoon meal time came, he comes in with the soup and rice again, sets it down to that. And I said, "No." But I had been conscious enough during the time that I realized I hadn't seen another American. I've been here for 4 days now. And this was the funny part. I haven't felt my hands all day. This is into the afternoon. I haven't felt anything from my waist up in a good while. If I can't use my hands, I can't feed myself. And I probably can't play golf again. So when he starts to pick up the stuff to go away, I said, "Wait a minute." And he turned around, does that, and I said, "I'll try." He picks it up. And I said, "Okay." He turned around and nodded my head. He wouldn't leave till I said yes. So he left the suit, went out and got the officer. Came back, and the officer asked me, and I tried with him, "I'll try." And he shook his head. So I said, "Okay." So he takes the handcuffs off, and I'd been through rope tying up before, and when they do that, the whole purpose is to cut off circulation, and when they release it, it's like grabbing an electric wire. If you've ever been shocked, by house current. Well, this time when he came off, I was just shook all over. And they brought in a little booklet, like I never had it down here, but they call it test booklets, the little blue book sort of thing lined with a whole thing of questions. Sit down and write. And so for about 3 or 4 days, I'd sit there and hold a pen in my mouth and push it around with my hands. And I'd get 6 or 8 words on a page that way and use up stuff. And there was questions, what's your name? And I put it down. What's your father's name? I put Daddy. What's your mother's name? I put Mommy. Where were you born? I put early age. You know, just Mickey Mouse. See, I don't know. I guess I was so beaten down by this point I didn't really care what they did. I was going to have some fun in the process. But they never referred to that again. And it proved, for me at least, the whole point was, we can make you do it. What that sergeant had said. We'll show you that we run this camp. You'll do what we tell you to do. So from then on, it's a game of how much I could keep them from doing it. And then that night, when you were asking, this was really my low point. When I ate that meal and realized that I had been broken. And so we had a big thunderstorm. It rained, and I was so thirsty. They hadn't given me any water except when the interrogator would be there, and he'd have a cup and offer it. And I remember I got up and I pulled the table over, put the chair on it, put the stool on it, and got up where I could get in this vent, and reached out and got a hold of a limb on the tree so that the rain coming down and run down, and I get some water off my arm. And then it quit raining about the time I got it. And so I went over and leaned up against a wall, just slumped down, and there was one light way over in the corner. And I looked up, and it just kept attracting my attention. And I remember thinking it was like Moses in the burning bush, I guess. And I sat there and I looked at the light. And whether it was a split second or an hour, I can't tell you. But I had an experience of something happened to me, and it was all over. I was feel very comfortable, very secure. You're going to live, you're going to get out of this, and you'll go home someday. And from then on, I was able to accept things that happened, and when there would be a crackdown right after escape in a night camp, and other things that come down, you'd have a little sense that this might be bad. I could just think about it for a minute, and I could feel comfortable again and go on and do what I had to do. And I remember thinking Harry Truman made the statement as president that he had no trouble sleeping every night because he knew he had done the best that day that he knew to do, and he needed his rest for the next day. And I realized that I was able to do that. I could lie down every night and go to sleep no matter what was going on.
And how long had you been a prisoner when that happened?
I was shot down on Wednesday afternoon, and that was Saturday night.
So
3 days.
3 days after you were shot down, you feel you had a moment that gave you, I won't call it peace, but gave you something that got you through the rest of those years.
Yep.
Was there a day in that prison camp after that that you didn't feel that awareness or didn't think about that? Or did that sustain you every single day?
I can't say that I thought it consciously every day, but the feeling was there every day.
And what do you think about that now? What do you think that was?
It still sustains me, and the experience that I had there after we were in those large groups, we started, after some confrontations with the Vietnamese, we started having Sunday church services. And I thought about it a lot. You know, what does this mean to me? What do I do? And I participated, not as an activist, but participated in the services, attended. And when I got home, I went to see another one of our classmates down here at Georgia Tech who had become an Episcopal minister. And I talked to him about it and asked him, you know, how did you make the transition? Because he had been a technical major. How did you make the transition to the, and told me experience. And the first assignment I had when I got back was at the Air War College. And one of my classmates there was a Catholic priest that I got to know fairly well. And I was still in this time, you know, I was saved in that ejection. I went through this other experience. What am I here for? And the Catholic priest helped me put it in the best perspective. He said, don't try to solve the problem. He said, you go through your life looking for the sign or looking for this or what. And he said, you may miss what you're actually here for. He said, just accept the fact that you're here and make the most of it that you can. And that's really what's been with me ever since.
Not like 5.5, almost 6 years a prisoner. How did you find out you were going home and when you were going home? And tell me about that experience.
Well, to put it all in perspective, when Nixon started the bombing again in May of '72, we were in the big prison there at Wallow. And somebody that went to quiz, as we called the interrogations, because it was easier to say and to tap, brought back a message that Nixon is crazy man. We don't know what happens now. But we had in our camp 1 South Vietnamese prisoner and 3 Thai prisoners who were allowed out to work and do things, and of course they were speaking the language, and they were really our intelligence. And we got a heads up that 209 was the number, literally, were going to be moved out of camp. And sure enough, about a week later, 209 of us were moved right up to the Chinese border, deep in the mountains, and a camp that we thought initially was new to us. We learned later on that others had been there ahead of us, who I don't know. But we spent the rest of '72 there and over the winter. And in October, we didn't have radios in each cell there. They didn't have power like we had back in the big prison. We had these little radios in each room, and you got these propaganda broadcasts. Hanoi, we called it, the voice of Vietnam, all the garbage. Up here, they had to do it by quizzes. And one of the fellows that went early picked up, they were asking him, what do you think about this proposed end of the war, or whatever? This is in early October. And then I was called out right at the end of October. And he asked me, he said, are you disappointed there was no settlement in October? I said, no, I didn't know there was going to be one. So how can I be disappointed for something I didn't know was going to happen? Wasn't going to happen anyway. And kind of went on with that. And then over Christmas and the holiday and New Year's, it got really cold and we were settling in. All of us were looking to be there in the winter. And one night, the building I was in up the top of the hill, one of the fellows woke us up and said, we just had 3 trucks come into camp. So we all stayed up and we counted 17 trucks. You don't need that many to bring in a month's load of food. Something is up. And the guards came around that morning and let us out to go out to eat or to shave, whatever we were going to do. We had a little area, kind of a little patio we could get out to in our building. And he looks around at one of the other guys and he does this. And then he goes back like that. Looks over and says, something is really up here. So we went back in, and just so we didn't miss out on it, we all started rolling up our gear. That afternoon when the guard came around and opened it up, and he gives us this, which was a signal to roll up, ready to move, we just all leaned over, patted our roll. He got a big smile on his face, and right after dark, they loaded us on the trucks, headed back to Hanoi, and about halfway down mid-afternoon, we stopped and had a little coffee break. They gave us water and little energy bars, coconut bar stuff. And instead of getting back on the truck necessarily to your own, they divided us out in 4 categories. And what turned out to be the first 2 release groups went back to the big prison. The 3rd release group went to the one we called a plantation, and the 4th one went to the zoo. And, excuse me, we'd been back about a week, and I was at the plantation in the 3rd group. They called us out one afternoon. We lined up, and the camp commander came over, and he read us the protocol from the Paris Treaty, that that in itself required that the prisoners be notified within 48 hours of this date. And they were told it, and they stood there for a few minutes waiting for us to do something, and when we didn't, they said, okay, dismissed, and we all filed back into our own little cells, and then we went over hugging each other. So, God, I hope it's true, hope it's true. And in my particular case, I was pulled out and taken up to Wallow. It turns out that after the first release group, there was a little difference of opinion between, and the conditions for release were that everybody would be released in 4 equal increments over the next 60 days. So, and with the sick and wounded being released first. Well, the U.S. expected that to be release the sick and wounded, then 4 more increments. The Vietnamese interpreted it to be the sick and wounded would be in the first increment. So they had a little hassle about that. And somehow they came up and released 20 guys, just pulled almost at random, came out. So as that was going on, I was pulled up to the second release group. Then they decided, no, the count didn't work. So I went back to the plantation. And then they pulled me out again. And whatever the problem was, we were supposed to be released on the 1st of March. And the camp commander came in, and we had the big, going away thing, special dinner, blah, 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 on the night of last night in February. And then he told us, he said, maybe you do not go tomorrow. There is a small problem. I will let you know. So the next morning he comes in and said, I don't think so today. And that night he said, maybe tomorrow. And then by March the 3rd, we were said, oh, to hell with it. I hope somebody got out of here anyway. And he came in that night and he says, I think tomorrow, okay. And sure enough, the next morning he comes in and came in. There was a group called, I forget the exact name, but they were an Indian, a Canadian, a Czech, and another Soviet Union type. Had to come around and inspect everybody. So they came through. We figured, I think we might make it today. And sure enough, about an hour later, we started going out. We got our go-home clothes that we'd been fitted for. We went out to pick them up, put them on. And they walked us out the front gate, and they had their little 20-seat buses out there, and we all got on and headed over to GLM for the big trip home.
I'd like to hear this.
Well, we got out there as we pulled out onto the ramp, and I saw that 141 out there. Of course, working out there, my neighbor at Craig had gotten out of the Air Force and was test pilot in 141, and I'd walked out into one just before I left to go to Southeast Asia. And when I saw that airplane, the United States of America, and that big flag up there, and I told a lot of people, when I walked down and walked up that ramp, I could smell the red clay out of North Georgia. I knew I was going home.
Is that just an expression, or did you really feel like you smelled? I mean,
I started feeling like I'm headed home, yeah.
Well, the one question I want to ask you, the penultimate, next to the last, is a lot of things changed for you while you were a prisoner. You found out about losing your father and losing other family members and your wife. And again, if you don't mind my asking, what sustained you through that?
Well, I had premonitions, or indications, I guess you'd say, on both. I only got 2 letters from my wife, and there were 6 lines, but she only used about 4 of them. So all she just said was, the children are fine, they help a lot. Another one was, I moved to Atlanta to go to Emory, the children doing well. You could almost read into it the indifference. And in the case of my dad, the one thing that I got from my mother was a birthday card that was signed Love, Mother. And that was probably one of the really low points when I realized he was gone, because I was looking forward to seeing him. I knew he was in bad shape when I left, but I was looking forward to going back and seeing him again. And so when I got there to Clark, we'd been there, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours, and they came around and got me and said, there's a colonel up here wants to see you. And he introduced himself from 13th Air Force headquarters. And we were standing in the doorway to the little ward area that I was in, and I looked up, and a technician that had been seeing me around was leaned up to the desk up here about 20, 30 feet. And I don't know why I turned around. There was another technician back standing around over here. This is not going to be a standard conversation. What is it? So he started out casually, told me about my aunt dying and my uncle dying and my father-in-law dying, and then your father died, and then your wife got a divorce. And as I've described it, it wasn't a surprise. It was the shock of confirmation. The things I was hoping weren't true, but I had a sense. And it was kind of ironic when I learned about more detail about my wife's divorce. When I was up in the mountains and I hadn't gotten anything, heard anything, I went to a quiz and I asked an officer whom I'd known from way back at the zoo. I said, I hadn't heard anything from my wife in a long time. I said, I'm wondering if maybe something has happened. I said, no, I think everything's fine. And I said, well, I would really like to know. I don't want my children to be hurting or having any problem. He said, okay, I ask. And several months later, I went to quiz with him again, and he said, I asked. He said, I think everything okay. As it turns out, that first quiz was within a week of when she filed for the divorce, and the second one was within a week of when it was granted. And they had sent the paperwork to Hanoi to camp a detention, and since I didn't reply within 30 days, I wasn't contesting it. Well, I was still going through the checkout down at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama, but my mother wanted to get the family together at home and visit, and so I flew up commercially, and my ex-wife was here in town at the time. She came out and picked me up at the airport, and we went over to her house, and we were talking. I was going to take my children out with me for this party, and we were sitting there talking, and she said, how you plan on getting to Bremen? Oh, gosh. Thought it hadn't crossed my mind. Oh, well, I'll rent a car. Oh, no, I guess I can't do that. I don't have a driver's license. Why? I didn't think of riding the bus. I don't know, because that'd been right off the bat. I thought, well, maybe Pat will rent me an airplane, because I had a pilot's license, commercial license. And I wasn't thinking of the fact that you got to have a medical to make it effective. But she said, well, you better do something. So this is getting kind of late if you're going out there tomorrow. So I called him up. I don't know, I guess we were looking at the phone book. I got him at home. And I said, hey, you got any airplane you might rent out tomorrow? He says, what for? I said, well, I need to get out to Bremen with me and the children. He said, when you want to go? And I said, oh, sometime mid-morning or so. He says, hold on a minute. He looked around and he said, how's about 10 o'clock? Would that be good? 10:30? I said, yeah, it'd be fine. So he said, well, you know how to get out to my place? And I said, yeah. He said, all right, I'll see you then. So we come driving up out here, and it turns out he had a demonstration set up for a hope for sale with a King Air, I think it was. Anyways, about an 8 or 10 place airplane. And this company, people were here, and they were really nice, welcomed us in, and said, yeah, we'll be glad. And they gave me a ride out to West Georgia Airport, and my brother was there to pick me up. But Pat and I have laughed about that a lot of times.
Those 6 years of your life that you literally gave to this country, and all that happened to you, what would you say to young people? Or what would you, if you could get them all to pay attention to you for the next minute, what would you say?
Well, first I would say that I'm proud of my service. At the time I was there, I honestly believed that we were doing something that needed to be done, because the threat of communism and the expansion of China and their efforts to particularly in Asia and in Southeast Asia, could have had very difficult future. And while we did not win, and unfortunately I think I have to say we actually did win the combat. Our politicians gave it away later on. But we did accomplish a stalemate, so to speak, and I think we stopped that expansion, gave those countries a chance to get on a little firmer basis. As far as Vietnamese people, I was disappointed for them, the boat people, that many were killed or died in the process of getting out of there, and in Cambodia that were literally killed during the Pol Pot regime. I don't think we can take any pride at all in allowing that to happen, but when we finally started recognizing the Vietnamese, I was asked by one of the local stations, what do you think about it with the trade and then the recognition? And I said, well, we're going over there to give them a chance for self-determination, and it looks like they're finally going to get it. And on the 2 trips I've made back over there, I think we really did win the hearts and minds because they really like Americans there now. But for the status now and the condition and the future of this country, I have real concern. The last few years, the mood of the country, the culture of the country, society have changed in ways that I cannot say that I feel proud about. But I do talk to enough young people who have good attitudes and good patriotic values that I'm optimistic that they will rise to the top and be the cream of the crop, and we'll get this country back on track someday.
Aviation, the art of aeronautics, began with the dreamers, inventors and daredevils who dared to defy gravity. The journey of aviation was nurtured by pioneers like the Wright brothers, whose first flight marked a historic milestone. The role of aircrafts in world wars was groundbreaking, dramatically changing warfare strategies. This initiated a technological evolution in aviation, transforming the simplistic wings of a biplane into the thunderous roar of jet engines. Let's journey through the ages of aviation. Behind every great aircraft, there were great minds. These visionaries, like Sir Frank Whittle, the innovator of the turbojet engine, redefined air travel. Then there's Skunkworks Kelly Johnson, the genius behind the SR-71 Blackbird. His designs combined speed, stealth and power, crafting machines that dominated the heavens. The contributions of these pioneers have left an indelible mark on the canvas of aviation, shaping the course of history and inspiring generations of engineers and aviators. Each epoch in aviation history gave birth to extraordinary aircrafts, each with their own unique features and roles. The Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird was a marvel of speed and stealth. The F-105 Thunderchief, a supersonic fighter bomber, was vital in the Vietnam War. The P-51 Mustang, a long-range fighter, was critical in World War II. The P-47 Thunderbolt, a heavyweight fighter, was used extensively in the same war. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, is a close air support icon. The Messerschmitt Me-262 marked a leap forward in aviation technology. Each of these game changers were instrumental in their eras, and their legacies still resonate today. Beyond the game changers, there are those that have transcended their practical roles to become icons. The Concorde was not just an aircraft, it was a supersonic symbol of luxury and speed. The B-52 Stratofortress, a strategic bomber, is an icon of power and resilience. These magnificent machines and others like them have become much more than just aircrafts. They are enduring icons that encapsulate the audacious spirit, the relentless innovation, and the boundless ambition that define the world of aviation. For more amazing aerial footage, and to join us in this incredible journey, check out the DroneScapes YouTube channel.
If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.